You are in the right room. This is effective evaluation. Just in case you're not in the right room, you can stay and you'll learn something. Just FYI, this is a district training and it will be recorded and it will be later on the Toastmaster District 56 website. Now that we have gotten all that out of the way, I'm very excited to introduce Alison Nissen. Alison Nissen is a passionate Toastmaster who wishes to help everyone feel comfortable giving and receiving evaluations. She is the current District 56 Q52 Area Director and a member of 2 Toastmaster Clubs. Please help me welcome our workshop coordinator, Alison Nissen.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Effective Evaluations Workshop. I'd like to think that Toastmasters' secret sauce is not only learning to become a better speaker and leader, it's receiving hands-on evaluations to help elevate our public presence. But mastering evaluations is daunting. It might feel like you're playing a game, but you don't understand the rules, and that sometimes people are gifted and you just feel a little clumsy. At least that's how I feel. Crafting and delivering effective evaluations is an important part of our Toastmasters journey. But without understanding the process, you might feel like you're in over your head. I've created a framework to help provide practical solutions to giving great feedback, whether you are delivering your first or your 51st evaluation. Many people don't realize that giving a good evaluation is a skill. And for the next hour, I will introduce my solution to the problem, how to educate and evaluate a speech in a positive way that not only encourages the speaker, but helps the remaining attendees also enhance their speaking and evaluation skills. And bonus, it can help retain and encourage guests to join. We will review 8 easy-to-use worksheets that help structure evaluations in fun and creative ways, provide live examples of how 3 of them can be used in a meeting, and finally, we will have a short Q&A period to answer any lingering questions. But first, my story. I'm Alison Nissen, a member of Talking Bull and Speak Up Houston Toastmasters. I first joined Lakeland, Florida Toastmasters in 2017, and I became, well, there's no other way to say this, addicted. As a brand new Toastmaster, I was given 2 tasks, give 3 speeches and 1 evaluation. For my icebreaker, I memorized my speech and spoke so fast that my 6-minute speech was done in less than 4 minutes. I stayed rooted in one place and added a tongue click every chance I had. Yes, I remember that evaluation like it was yesterday, not 4 years ago. I gave my next 2 speeches, but have 0 recollection of either evaluation. Were they helpful? I don't remember, but I do know they weren't harmful, or I would have hightailed it out of that club without ever looking back. When it was time for me to give my first evaluation, I tried to remember how the other evaluators approached their task. They stood in the front of the room with a notebook and sandwiched the good, the not so good, and the good into a 2 to 3 minute speech. I knew there had to be more to it. As a professor, I'm used to offering meaningful feedback, but I also know that feedback is not always created equal. I know how to evaluate an essay, but a speech, that was a whole other animal. And as a rule follower, I wanted to understand the principles of evaluations so I wouldn't feel so clumsy. I created a very primitive cheat sheet, but I felt like I was reading from a list. Giving an evaluation, I discovered, was another form of impromptu speaking. But if I wasn't careful, I thought I might be too nitpicky or offer empty platitudes. We all know what a good evaluation looks like, and we really know what a bad evaluation looks like. It's one that criticizes rather than encourages. It's one that starts with, you should. I don't know about you, but I don't want someone to should on me. So I set out to become a great evaluator. I started watching videos. Thank you, YouTube. I discovered seasoned Toastmasters advice. Honesty infused with positivity. They'd say, Shaggy, I love your hand gestures. They show your enthusiasm for driving a van. I might suggest that rather than standing still in the middle of the room, that you pretend to drive and walk from one side to the other. A seasoned Toastmaster offers encouragement combined with helpful ways to evaluate a speech. Scooby, thank you for sharing the best treats to find when you're shopping for dog food. Next time, you might consider bringing a sample to show everyone what to look for. And a seasoned Toastmaster adds value to someone's speech to help them improve, no matter how many speeches they have given in the past. Velma, you are an experienced Toastmaster. I love how you describe following the clues to solve mysteries. I liked how you lowered your voice as if you're sharing a secret and spoke high when you expressed fear. But when you covered your mouth, I had trouble understanding you. And a seasoned Toastmaster gives the speaker actionable ideas to grow and improve. Daphne, your fashion sense is unparalleled. Consider adding some accessories to your speech, much like you would a wardrobe. Describing what the haunted mansion looks like would be just like adding earrings and the right pair of shoes to your speech. And seasoned Toastmasters offer suggestions for consideration rather than, Freddie, you should really try to memorize your speech. They would say, Freddie, I bet you've told the story of the big reveal of that monster so many times that I challenge you to consider not using your notes next time. And the last thing I learned that seasoned Toastmasters do is they break the fourth wall and engage the entire audience. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Toastmasters, the way Mr. Bad Guy used dancing to simulate his getaway really showcased his skills of using gestures to make his point. Once I learned these ideas, I put them into practice. Sometimes I did well, and other times, well, let's just say I'm still a work in progress. The great thing about mastering effective evaluations is the ability to apply these techniques to your personal life, your professional life, and your public life. Occasionally, we are asked to offer assessments for something. It might be the performance of a child in a play or of a subordinate at work. It might even be of a political policy. Learning to use a framework helps us structure our feedback in a way that celebrates relationships rather than harms them. Now that you know my story, I'd like to show you how to put these principles into action. Before I introduce the effective evaluation worksheets, we have the privilege of having a mini meeting to provide context. Please help me welcome Distinguished Toastmaster, my mentor, Division Director, and fellow Talking Bull member, David Bell.
Welcome, fellow Toastmasters and those who may think they want to be Toastmasters one day. Today, we're going to have a fun evening. We're going to talk about evaluations and, most importantly, effective evaluations. The great thing about evaluations is you get a chance to get real personal feedback. And a lot of times it's from somebody you really respect, and a lot of times it may be somebody you don't even know that well, but it gives you a chance to get another perspective on what you just did in the speech you just delivered. And feedback is something that goes a long way. It not only helps in a Toastmasters Club, it helps in a work environment, and it also works at home. So giving feedback is something not everybody is comfortable with, tonight we'll share with you some tips of the trade. So with that, I'm going to introduce some of the roles. Our meeting tonight is going to be like this. First of all, we will introduce some of our functionaries. Secondly, we'll introduce our keynote speaker. And third, we'll listen to some evaluations. And once we wrap up with the evaluations, different styles of evaluations, I'll hand it back over to Alison Nissen to wrap us up for the evening and to reflect on what we've learned from the experience. So with that being said, one of the functionaries I want to call out tonight is actually one of my mentors, and also a member of Talking Bull Toastmasters, former district governor of District 56, former club president and the founder of our club. Join me in welcoming our timer, Pat London. Pat, what will you be doing tonight?
Thank you so much, Mr. Toastmaster. I will be serving as your timer today. It is extremely important for an effective communicator and an effective leader to speak within a certain time limit. Everyone appreciates that. So I will be timing our speaker today, and I'll also be timing our evaluators. The speech that's being given today is going to be a 5 to 7 minute speech. Therefore, when I see that 5 minutes has occurred, I will show the green background. When I see that 6 minutes has happened, the yellow background. And then at 7 minutes, the red background, and that means 30 seconds to wrap up. For the evaluations, those are 2 to 3.5 minutes. So at 2, the green, at 2.5, the yellow, at 3, the red, again, 30 seconds to wrap up. Mr. Toastmaster, back to you.
Thank you very much for a timely review of our time for this evening. Timing is always a very important part of a meeting. It's one of the things we also learn in Toastmasters, to be within our time. And the timer's role gives us that chance to stay within time and to honor other people's time. Tonight, we have a great speaker. She's a lifelong learner, and she's been in learning and development for some time. She believes that we all have potential to evolve, to change, and become people we dream of being. Edna has 17 years of experience of designing, developing, and delivering training content for corporate employees for large groups, small groups, classroom, virtual, one-on-one. She has also worked in the nonprofit sector as a community developer, community organizer, serving the low-income and primarily Latino community of Lower East Kensington in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In her spare time, Edna enjoys photography, cooking, and hiking with her spouse and their dog. Her speech is in the Team Collaborations Pathways educational program. The speech is what we call a level 3. There's generally 5 levels in the pathways, each pathway's path. And she's in level 3. Know Your Sense of Humor is the project. The speech title is Mistakes in Teamwork, Tales from My Old Army Days. Join me in welcoming Edna Miranda.
Thank you. Why is it that teamwork sometimes fails despite having been given every opportunity to succeed? And why is it that sometimes when we need each other the most, we find that we just can't get along? When I was 18 years old, I enlisted in the United States Army National Guard. Now those people, they know about teamwork. They dressed us alike. Everywhere we went together. We even sang songs together. Did you know that singing together helps to establish a social bond? Here's an example of just one of the songs we sang. Mama, mama, can't you see what the Army's done to me? I used to date a high school stud. Now I'm crawling in the mud. Now I'm crawling in the mud. Catchy tune, isn't it? All those movies that portray basic training, or as it's most often known, boot camp, as being a test of one's physical and mental endurance, all those movies are pretty accurate. And the military knows this. So they encourage us to pair up, find a buddy, someone who you can go through the experience with. I found my buddy on my very first night in the barracks. She was assigned to the bunk across from mine, and she was crying. "Are you okay?" I asked her. And she replied, "No, I hate it here. I miss home. And most of all, I miss my boyfriend. Do you want to be my buddy?" Yes. Cut to 2 weeks later, and my buddy and I didn't get along. We trusted each other. We trusted each other enough to load live ammo into each other's magazines, but we squabbled all the time. One time, they took us on a 13-mile march with all our gear strapped to our backs, even the shovel. When we arrived at our destination, we were to put up our tents. Female soldiers all around us were quickly putting up their tents. The faster they got their tents up, the more time they had to rest. Not my buddy and me. It was well past nightfall, and we were still trying to put our tent up. Part A, I remember reading the instructions. We were missing a piece of the puzzle here. I had my flashlight with a red lens cap on it so no one can see our destination somewhere in Fort Dix, New Jersey. Even remembering that night, no matter how many times I tell that story, I feel the anxiety. I remember thinking, we're going to have to sleep under that tent like it's a tarp because we can't get that middle pole up. What was wrong with my buddy and me? Eventually, we did get that tent up, but it was well past our bedtimes before we did. Was it because we didn't have a common background? All those other soldiers had just met, and they'd managed to put their tents up. What was wrong with us? I read somewhere that for teamwork to work, a mutual exchange of information is required for understanding. That's the definition of communication. But I would change that slightly to say, for teamwork to work, a mutual exchange of relatable information is required for understanding. Because my buddy had shared information with me, a lot of information. But unfortunately, our backgrounds and our upbringings were very different. There was nothing I could really relate to. And even more unfortunately, she spent a lot of her time crying over her boyfriend. You see, within those first 2 weeks of us having been in basic training, he'd sent her a Dear Jane letter, informing her that he couldn't wait for her. It was a 10-week program. I really couldn't understand. As a matter of fact, that sympathy that I felt for her that first night had turned to apathy. Because after reading that letter that she'd received from her boyfriend, she made a lot of mistakes. When the drill sergeant would call out the order for us to turn left, she'd turn right. "Your other left," I'd whisper to her, but it was always too late. He caught us, and whenever he punished her, he punished me as well because I was her buddy. We had to do push-ups until we went into muscle failure. But you know, what if my buddy had said to me or had told me a story about why it was that she loved him? What if she told me that one day he showed up at her job and carried her out of there, and all the women on the floor had cheered and applauded, even her mom who happened to be working that shift? That would have created empathy in me. I can feel the joy of that moment. Wow, this guy sounds like a prince. What a great guy. But that never happened. And I could have added something to the conversation instead of laying on that bottom bunk, listening to her one-woman monologue about her boyfriend's rampant libido. I could have asked her, "Is your boyfriend as good looking as Drill Sergeant Tuitt? Did you see him when he took off his BDU jacket this morning, his biceps?" But I never did. And you know, that 18-year-old version of me, she's still here. And the advice that I have for her, whenever she shows her pretty brown eyes and her immature face, To her, I say, withhold your judgment, withhold criticism. Everybody makes mistakes. If you're living your life fearlessly and putting yourself out there, you're going to make mistakes. But the best advice that I have for her, besides withholding the criticism and the judgment, is that if you're going through a tough situation and you've got somebody with you to help shoulder the burden, that's a blessing. See it that way. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
What a beautiful story. It's always fun in Toastmasters because every week when we attend meetings, we get to hear not one story, but typically 2 or 3 different great stories from great speakers like Edna. Thank you so much, Edna, for sharing your story with us tonight. So now we're going to transition to a brief intermission. And the reason, and I say intermission, it'll be back to Alison. The reason for that is we want to give our judges, or not our judges, but our evaluators a few minutes. That was a slip of words, wasn't it? We're in contest season. For those fellow Toastmasters, they know why I said judges, but we're talking evaluators, someone to give us feedback. We want to give them a few minutes to collect their thoughts, write them down, and then we'll come back to our evaluators. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Alison.
Hello, I am going to share my screen. I hope you can see it. If you can't see it, just speak up now. It's always a chore, right? When we do these Zoom meetings, we hope we're doing everything properly because, you know, there are assessments. One of the most, I think, creative ways of using an evaluation is to use what is considered the acronym method. And this particular method is interesting in that what you do is you find a word that fits the speech. And for this example, I've used the word value. And then each letter describes one part of that speech. What value did you find from that speech? The second letter might be A for analyze, and how do you appraise that speech? The third letter, learned. What lessons did you learn that you can relate to? And the fourth letter, maybe something unexpected. And the fifth letter is E. What was extraordinary? You can come up with your own acronym. And I always applaud people that do, because this really is a creative way of using a framework to describe and to give feedback. A second method is the sandwich method. The sandwich method, many of us are amazed that we know it because we hear it probably most frequently. I apologize, my dog is leaving and letting everyone know she's on guard. We have our top slice of bread, where we might consider discussing things like the visuals and the vocals and understanding. We have that meat and cheese part of the sandwich, which offers the constructive feedback. And then we have that bottom slice. What was the best? When I first gave my evaluation, I had watched people use this sandwich method very well. Something good, something a little less good, and then that strength at the very end. EEE, or what I saw, what I heard, what I felt. These are the same worksheets, but with different acronyms or different ways to use it. So we have ears, eyes, and emotion, what I heard, what I saw, what I felt. And we think about this way: what I saw, the visuals, the eye contact, gestures, the space usage, what I heard, clarity, vocal variety, the speed of how fast or slow someone is speaking, what I felt. Did I make a connection with the speech itself? Was the speech organized? What was the impact? Offering food for consideration. And then also strength. Again, we want to make sure we end with that strength part so that everyone feels awesome at the end of their speech and evaluation. Another one of my favorites is the 3-2-1 method, or good, better, best. What are 3 things that are good about the speech? 2 things to challenge the speaker and 1 thing that is the very best. What was their biggest strength? The movie method. What is the beginning of the speech? How did that make you feel? Was it engaging? Was the hook strong? And then the middle of the speech was the body. And what was the appeal? How were the transitions? Was there audience awareness and comfort and expressiveness? And at the end of the movie, was there a recap and a call to action? And the Oscar winner shot at the very end? What was that 1 thing that was going to push it to the very top? COD, content, organization, and delivery. Again, we talk about the topic appeal and the hook and the organization. Does it have a good, strong introduction and transition and a conclusion? And how was the delivery? And then, of course, that favorite thing. And I've offered 2 bonus worksheets here. We have language counts and our preparation checklist. I, for one, really, really appreciate a preparation checklist. It reminds me that I need to bring a pencil and pen. I need to bring my notebook. I need to ask the speaker for their introduction ahead of time so that I know what they will be discussing and also if there's any goals that they have for that speech. It also helps us make sure we have a distraction-free zone and that we focus on the speech and not the personal qualities of the speaker, but what the speech has actually done for us and how it's related to the audience. So these are my worksheets that I've created. And at the very end, I welcome you all to ask questions. But now I'm going to turn it back over to David, where we're going to see 3 of these worksheets put into practice. David.
Thank you, Alison. Those are extremely beneficial tools. I encourage you all to get a copy of them, share them with your other club members as well. Well, I tell you what, Alison, if I had that when I first started out in Toastmasters, it may not have taken me as long. That being said, we're going to have 3 fabulous evaluators. Each, as Alison said, are going to be given a different approach to the evaluation. So it gives you the chance to see these different approaches. Our first evaluator is Andy Rennie. Andy is proud to be the current president of Talking Bull Toastmasters here in Houston. He started Toastmasters 3 years ago, completed the presentation mastery path in Pathways, and he's on level 4 of the visionary communications path. He's originally from Canada, but lived in Scotland, the UAE, Egypt, and West Africa before coming to Texas. And I understand he tried to get here as soon as he could. Join me in welcoming Andy Rennie. Andy?
Thank you, David. And thank you, Edna. I loved your speech. Your speech is about knowing your sense of humor. And you talked about an adventure you had in the Army and a friendship that you made or maybe didn't make actually, and how it affected you. I'm going to give my feedback in the form of an acronym, and it's the acronym of ARMY, A-R-M-Y. So the first part of my feedback is A-R. And I'm going to say it like Matthew McConaughey would say it. What you did, all right, all right, all right. What you did very well was your camera setup was excellent. You had fantastic smile the whole time. You had great facial expressions. I really loved your use of descriptive words. And actually, they made your speech very efficient because you got quite a lot across, a lot of information across by using very key words. The ones I picked out were finding a buddy. I thought just the fact that it was a buddy brought a lot to the story, that you're trying to build a buddy, someone you could really rely on. I also love the phrase that she was giving a one-woman monologue. I just really like those use of words. So there was some excellent word usages. I loved your authenticness and your passion. It's obviously a true story that's very close to your heart. And that brings the audience into the story very well. I mean, it drags us all in. It was a great message too about the importance of building empathy with people that you're working with. And I love that the whole message. It really made me think about how I need to apply that in my own life. So thank you. The last thing I'll mention on the all right, all right, all right is your pace. your hand gestures, your tone were all really fantastic. So the next letter of the acronym is M. Maybe things you could think about. Not necessarily factual, but I felt your humor was maybe something that not everyone would get. I like it. I really like dry humor, but I'm not sure that the humor was obvious at all times because it was quite a serious topic. One thing I think you might want to think about is smiling a little bit more and maybe even laughing a little bit in your speech to let people know it's a joke. And I think that's very specific to Zoom because it's hard in Zoom because you don't get the feedback of the audience and the audience doesn't really feel from you. So I think you have to make a little bit of extra effort. Also at the beginning, you just dove right in and started going 100 miles an hour. And it took a little while to catch up to you. So I think a little pause at the beginning would maybe help a lot. Those are the only two things I would recommend from what I saw. And I want to finish with the last letter of Army, the Y. Yeah! What you did absolutely fantastically well. And that for me was the singing. The singing was just awesome. You've got a good singing voice, first of all. The song was funny. And that definitely brought the humor that you were going for in your knowing your humor module. And I think it pulled the audience in and really made us get behind your story. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Andy, for an excellent evaluation. Makes us all want to join the Army. That being said, let's go to our second evaluator for this evening. I just met this gentleman this week, and he is just a tremendous asset to Toastmasters, and it's been fun getting to know him on this project. His name is John Morrow. He first became a Toastmaster in 1985. He joined Lakeland Toastmasters Club in March of 1993. He's currently the president of Bartow Toastmasters and the vice president of education of Lakeland Toastmasters. And he's held every office at the club level. And he's also served at the district level as well. He is born in Chattanooga, a graduate of Trevecca Nazarene College, and he moved to Lakeland, Florida in early 1975. Join me in giving a big welcome to our friend from Florida, John Morrow.
Thank you, David, and thank you, everybody, fellow Toastmasters, distinguished guests, and other visitors that are with us. And just as Alison was talking about, she has a dog that sometimes wants to bark his approval or his disapproval. You may see a white cat jump across my screen from time to time. Her name is Marielle, and she has a habit of jumping up and walking across my keyboard. Edna, first of all, thank you for your service. I think it's important for us to recognize the fact that the Army and the service are important to those of us who appreciate the fact that we have the freedom to share our stories. And I'm thankful for the fact that you were able to share your story with us. And I enjoyed listening to it, but I especially enjoyed the opening of it when you decided to give us a tune. I like tunes, they're fun. They kind of change up the situation. And that was a tune that's catchy. And I can see why you would use it because obviously there's polar opposites taking place there. And you pointed that out very quickly from being basically on the streets of Broadway driving around looking for guys. Now you're crawling in the mud and there aren't any guys nearby, except for, of course, that guy that walked out of the tent that you thought maybe I should have pointed out that physique. There is some interesting things as I watch you. You're dressed professionally. You have a great appearance on camera. Your eyes, you look at us. And this is important because you see in a virtual setting, it's difficult to focus. That camera is really what you ought to be looking at. You are the epitome of a person who focuses on the camera. And it makes the person watching that little box on their screen think, hey, they're talking directly to me. Nicely done. Because you fill up most of the box with this part of your body and up, it does somewhat limit your gestures. But you had some very good expressions. Particularly, I like the one with the flashlight when you were shining down on something. And every now and then you would bring the hands up and you would try to use them to make a point and to draw into like a series of steps. I'm talking about relationships as it relates to the Army and why that buddy wasn't such a great buddy after all. It's always important to also note that your voice is varied and that you have a lot of good vocal variety, but I would have liked to have seen a little more of this kind of thing, getting up to the camera a little close, getting soft for a second and talking about the sobbing, the weeping in the background. Use that as a way to continue to capture the people. I have another recommendation that I think would make a big difference. Every now and then, pause and smile a bit more and kind of throw us a curve, because you're hitting the speech, you're hitting the points, you're doing the work, and you're telling the story, and the story is compelling and enjoyable and one I can relate with, and I'm getting all kinds of mental pictures in my mind as you're telling it. But every now and then, it's nice for you to look and say, hey, there's a good ending to this story. There's a good close, and I'm going to give you some great ideas to take with you so the teamwork will be your success story. All in all, to listen to this was a treat. It was like an ice cream sandwich. Every bite, cold, sweet, and creamy. Thank you, Rennie.
Thank you so much, John, for an excellent evaluation. One of the things you may have noticed about John's evaluation is the specificity of the evaluation. And that is so critical to help people to figure out what exactly can I do to get better the next time I give this speech. Thanks again, John. Appreciate it. Our next evaluator is also an accomplished Toastmaster. Her name is Andrea Walton. She's an accomplished poet. She's a diva on wheels. Andrea hates the word handicap. Instead, she considers herself handy-capable. Andrea is working towards her DTM and has recently completed her own DTM project. She participates in a number of Toastmasters Club, and I've been a fellow member with her over the years, and it's just been a joy getting to know her. Join me in welcoming Andrea Walton.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Now we can't. You're back on mute. You're still on mute. Now you're on.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. Hi, Edna. First of all, it was a pleasure to listen to your speech. You are excellent at I'm trying to put this into words. You are excellent at telling a story and delivering it. Your eye contact was great. Your gestures were great for the most part because of the fact that we're on Zoom. There's only so much any of us can do, but you made it work, so thank you. Your vocal variety was on point. Let's see. Your impact was also good. What I would have liked to see you do with the speech is elaborate a little bit more. So just telling us more about your friendship with your roommate or your buddy. And my favorite thing about your speech was just to see you give it. I mean, because you delivered it with such grace. You didn't seem nervous. You were very prepared. So thank you. All in all, I think you did a great job. Back to you, David.
Thank you, Andrea. Excellent evaluation. You may have noticed with Andrea, she was very positive And she reflected on her perspective on the evaluation. And that's really what we bring to the table as an evaluator is our perspective. So thank you, Andrea, for sharing that. With that being said, Edna, I just want to comment. You may have noticed if you were watching the screen, Edna was taking copious notes. She was listening, she was soaking it in. And as a speaker, this is like gold. It's like gives us something to work with that's very tangible that we can work with going forward. So thank you, Edna, again, for being willing to be our guest speaker this evening. And with that, I'm going to close out this portion of our meeting and turn it back over to Alison Nissen.
Hello again. Thank you all. This has been so much fun. Before I open the floor for questions and answers, I would like to thank my team. This has been my DTM project. As I shared with you in the beginning, when I first joined Toastmasters, I was absolutely clueless about evaluations. I asked everybody I could how to create an effective evaluation. I wasn't even sure if they were effective. And it wasn't until I started to do extra research and really dive into what a good evaluation looks like and how to make one effective that I started to understand and put together the different puzzle pieces for an effective evaluation. I'm going to ask Edna, as David had already introduced her, she had recently joined Talking Bull Toastmasters. She hails from Philadelphia, and that's how I got to know Edna. And she stepped up to be part of my project immediately. She wanted to join and learn how to become an effective evaluator. And so I've got a question for you, Edna. What do you think of the challenges the evaluators laid out for you?
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of my evaluators for giving me your critiques and some excellent points for me to work on. I appreciate this. I've been a Toastmaster for a year, and all of your feedback is something that I wrote down here and that is valuable to me. I do want everybody to know that my buddy, I loved her, and I know she loved me. If you've ever been a soldier, if you know a soldier, a good soldier is willing to give their lives for each other. And so I certainly was a good soldier, and I know she was as well. I appreciate the feedback about smiling more. I think that that's something whenever I see somebody that is on one of these Zoom calls and they're smiling, it puts me at ease right away. And that's such good feedback. And a couple of people mentioned that, and that's something that I will definitely work on. The other point that was made by Diva on Wheels was just to elaborate on the friendship. And that's why I did just now. I really want everybody to know that we did care about each other, even though we squabbled. So teamwork doesn't always have to mean that, you don't squabble, you do. So thank you, a great experience. Thank you so much, Alison, for giving me this opportunity. It was a terrific experience for me.
Well, thank you, Edna, so much. It is a challenge to be offered 3 evaluations in one evening, and it can be a little daunting, but I'm so glad you were here with us, and that really was a great speech. I'm going to interview Andy Rennie. Andy and I joined Talking Bull at about the same time period. He had preceded me there by maybe a month or 3. But one of the things I love most about Andy is that he really dives into Pathways, Toastmasters educational program, and uses it for his professional experiences and has elevated himself. So he uses Pathways to achieve win-win outcomes. But what I'd really like to ask you, Andy, is have you ever had an evaluation that felt less than motivating?
Oh, thanks, Alison. And it's kind of a loaded question because I have. But just recently, if you don't know me, I've been in Toastmasters for 3 years. The first 2 years, I entered speech competitions and I got to the district final both years, which is pretty cool. But that meant when I entered this year's competition, or getting close to this year's competition, I was a pretty confident young man. I went out and I got invited to go to a club and give a practice speech. So I chose to do a practice for my planned victorious, humorous speech. And I gave the speech. I felt good. I felt confident. I thought it was a really good speech. And the club, because it was a club I'd never visited, they said, we've put our most experienced Toastmaster in charge of giving your evaluation. So I was really looking forward to it. And he basically said, I could tell you a lot of things, but I'm just going to tell you, you're not funny. There was no humor in that at all. As a matter of fact, I found it quite disturbing. And I'm saying it now kind of joking, but it really hurt me right to my core, because we got to realize, even in experienced Toastmasters, like I've given speeches to lots and lots of clubs, and I've been on the district stage, we're still putting ourselves out there. We're still exposing ourselves. We have, why are people afraid of talking? Because they're afraid of putting themselves out and not meeting the expectations of others, of letting them down or looking silly or not meeting up to the requirements of others. And that's really what got driven home to me by that evaluation. And it shook my confidence for quite a little while. It took me a little while to get my mojo back. So I think we got to be really cognizant of it. What I realized after that is every time I give an evaluation, it's really important that I give positive feedback and make the person feel good, because they are getting up there. They are doing a great job. I've never seen a bad speech. I've never seen a speech I didn't enjoy, honestly. But we all have things we can improve on. And that's what we want to touch on, what we can improve on. But we don't sell them down the river. Hope that answered the question, Alison.
Thank you, Andy. John Morrow, as we have all experienced, is a very fascinating and entertaining Toastmaster. He is one of my favorites. He loves the mantra, I never noticed, to remind himself that life is about the clues and answers that are right in front of us. He was my very first mentor in Lakeland, Florida. And I'd like to ask you, John, as a longtime Toastmaster, how has practicing the skill of evaluations helped you in your professional life?
Thank you so much, Alison, and I will answer that question, but may I have one moment of shameless self-promotion? I'd like to do my screen share, if I may, and show you just one thing, and this is really what makes my heart beat. My first grandchild. At last. It only took me until I was almost 70 to become a grandfather. Evaluations are something that, for me, Alison, began originally by just looking for things to point out that we wanted people to work on. And I had always come from backgrounds in my life where when you get called into the office, or as we sometimes say, called on the carpet, you know you're going to get chewed out. And I understand that in a business environment, you can't stroke people. You've got to get work done. But in Toastmasters, the very mission of the club says we provide a supportive and nurturing environment. As I have moved through Toastmasters, I have been blessed with individuals who have been mentors to me, have coached me, and people that have come into my life who aren't even a part of the club, but the people that I've met during the course of being a Toastmaster, traveling to conferences and being involved in many of the Toastmasters functions, especially now that Zoom is a very busy and important part. I mean, it's not every day that a guy in Central Florida can actually be having a meeting with a good group of folks from Houston, Texas. And that's kind of a cool thing for me. And yet, this is exactly why I enjoy coming here, because if an individual is an outsider, they've never really understood what Toastmasters stands for. And if they watch the meeting, the first thing they're going to discover is we all started with the same set of issues. We suffered from getting tongue-tied. We might even have had glossophobia, scared to death of the idea of standing in front of a crowd. You know, 3 out of every 4 people are actually morbidly afraid of public speaking. And Toastmasters is the only location, the only organization, the only environment, the only laboratory where you can come in, make the mistakes. The mistakes are going to be pointed out, but every mistake's going to be brought with a recommendation to help you overcome it. One of the first things I learned in evaluation, Alison, was I felt like you were struggling with that. I know how that feels. I've done the same thing. Here's what worked for me, and I found it. Made the biggest difference in my life. When you have that kind of an attitude towards anyone and everyone who is a speaker, You're going to have them leaving the meeting with a sweet taste in their mouth, but they're also going to leave with a mission that when they show up, they're going to be better than they were the last time. And my mantra of all mantras in Toastmasters is, if an individual can't leave a meeting better than they were when they arrived, then we have failed in our commitment to create communicators, leaders, and people with a servant's heart. That's why I love evaluations.
Well, thank you, John. That is beautifully said. I am honored to be your friend. Andrea Walton is another good friend of mine. She has also just completed her own DTM project. Congratulations, Andrea. And I want to ask you, how using a framework such as these worksheets help you formulate your thoughts?
Great question, Alison. They help me because for me to give an evaluation is a challenge. I absolutely, well, I'm terrified to give an evaluation because, first of all, I'm not good at it. Second of all, I'm afraid of being too hard on the person that I'm evaluating. And that's the last thing I want to do. I don't want to discourage someone from being a Toastmaster member, because I know how that feels to get an evaluation where you just feel like you screwed up your speech. And so for me, having the worksheets as a tool helps a lot. So
Thank you, Andrea.
you're welcome.
I'm going to ask everyone else on my team questions, but we're going to answer them very quickly because I want to make sure I have the opportunity to let the audience ask some questions as well. So Pat London is another one of my mentors from Talking Bull. She has a fabulous way about presenting evaluations. And I want to ask you, have you ever had the experience where someone else's speech evaluation provided you with an aha moment that helped you evaluate your own speech process?
Thank you, Alison. And the answer is yes. And just about every single evaluation I have ever received, I have learned something very important. Because when someone's telling you, this is how I saw you, this is how I responded, that's the most important information and feedback you can get. If you know your audience, you can hopefully craft a speech that will reach them. But let's face it, every one of us, when we give a presentation, we're hoping for a certain result. We're hoping for a certain reception to our message. And evaluations, it's just that person's opinion. And so I've gotten some evaluations that I thought, well, how can that be true? But as I thought about it, I realized it's true for that person. And therefore, if I want to reach them, I need to listen and I need to think about that the next time I give a presentation. So all of it is valuable. Thanks, Alison.
Wow, Pat, that again, is something else to think about. Reaching our audience is always an important goal. David Bell, I introduced earlier as one of my mentors, and here's another loaded question because I will tell you, the first time I ever saw David give an evaluation, I was in awe because he had a structure that I had not seen before. So David, my question to you is, do you have a go-to evaluation style?
Well, I've become known for the, let me tell you what I saw, let me tell you what I heard, let me tell you what I felt. And I like that because it is about the emotions. It's about the things that we see and that we hear and we feel. And so that's probably my favorite go-to evaluation because that's the way I see speakers every time. I started out watching speakers in church growing up. And whether or not we know it, we're evaluating that speaker. And what I saw and what I heard and what I felt was always what I walked away from that speaker. And so as I do my coaching today, those are things I employ in coaching, but I also use it in Toastmasters as well.
Well, thank you, David. And I'd like to bring up Jennifer Nelson, who rounds out my committee. And Jennifer is a Toastmaster overachiever, and she holds a DTM and serves as an officer in multiple clubs. But what I really want to know is, how have evaluations helped shape your professional speaking?
Yes, thank you. There's one thing that did help me, and I think that that's always why we have to tell people really from the heart. And I always ended my questions or my sentences in a high-pitched voice. And after a lot of people pointed that out, then I was able to, when a lot of people tell you the same thing, sometimes it's an aha moment that we all get. And then it has helped me to be able to end my sentences with confidence.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, Alison, I would like to congratulate you on your DTN project completion. And also, we put the evaluations in the chat, and there's going to be a survey, because I know we're about 8 p.m., but I know you're going to stay and answer as many questions as you can. But I just want to make sure that everybody does the survey for your fabulous presentation.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know you'll all give me high marks. Woo-hoo. I want to send out a special shout out to Roop Roy, who has been the Zoom master behind the scenes, and Joe Ido for also challenging me to hold a workshop. She put it out there on the internet and said, let's do workshops. And I thought, okay, I'm in. So here we are. And I really want to thank everyone for being here. But I do want to open the floor to everybody. And if anybody has any questions, to either put them in the chat or to, well, we have a question in the chat already. So how long should you be in the club before giving an evaluation? I gave my first evaluation after I gave 3 speeches. I'm not sure if there's a standard. I know in Pathways, there is they want you to do one, I think, after your 2nd or 3rd speech. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it's recommended to start. A lot of people hold off for a while so they feel a little more confident in their speaking abilities. But I say jump right in and just start going for it.
I'll agree. I agree, because level 1 is identical on all paths. And after the icebreaker, usually the next step is to do the evaluation and presentation process, evaluation feedback process. And since you're giving that speech twice and you're using feedback, what they want you to do is then incorporate that feedback in evaluating someone else. And that is a requirement actually in the evaluation feedback portion before you go to research and presenting. And that'll help you complete. So if you're going to complete level 1, you need to be doing at least 1 evaluation, if not more.
And does anyone else have another question? Should evaluations, they're going fast. I have to turn on my chat screen. Should evaluations become standardized, that is, to use the same format in the club you belong? Actually, I don't think so, because evaluations are a form of speech, and they're also a form of impromptu speaking. And not every framework works well for every speech. For example, what I saw, what I heard, what I felt works really well with a heartfelt speech. Works really well because you can really get into that, what I feel and am I connected. But there's times when the sandwich method might really be the better one. And it's also going to depend on the way that you process on how you would do your own evaluation. For example, I have a really challenging time trying to do an acronym, because it requires me to come up with the words that match the letters Andy, I'm going to give you the round of applause for that one because you are just brilliant at it. And I'm always in awe of that. So I would have a hard time if my club adopted that and everyone had to do it. I think that being able to showcase different styles also keeps things interesting and entertaining. Any other questions? We are right at 8 o'clock. If anyone has any other questions, let me know. If you've put your email in the chat, I will email you as well all the PDFs. So I'm going to go ahead and say thank you for coming. I have really enjoyed this. I am so honored to be a Toastmaster. I would have wished I found it 25 years ago. I didn't, but I got here as fast as I can, much like they say the great state of Texas. I got here as fast as I could. So here we are. And thank you once again. Thanks to my team. You really, really helped me build this workshop together. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. See y'all next time. Feel free to unmute yourself.